month Women in Sustainable Energy webinar. I am Sherry-Ann Farquharson, Capacity Development and Gender Expert with the Caribbean Center for Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency. And I'm joining you today from beautiful Barbados. I invite you to type in the chat, let us know where are you joining today's webinar from. This is actually the third in the CARICOM Energy Month 2024 webinar series. So if you missed the first two, where we heard from our youth, and we also discussed financing options for the energy transition, I invite you to go to the CARICOM Energy YouTube page and listen to some very insightful discussions. Today, though, we're going to be hearing from 5 women across the region who are blazing trails in the sustainable energy sector. These accomplished professionals, they're going to be sharing lessons from their journey, including their wins, their losses, their challenges, and also their insights on promoting gender diversity as we continue to explore this year's Energy Month theme, investing in sustainable energy and accelerating the transition. So I'll be doing a short introduction of each of our panelists, and then I will invite them to share a little bit with us about their career journey. So to get started, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Malaika Masson. Malaika is a lead energy specialist in the energy division at the Inter-American Development Bank, and currently she is managing the IDB energy portfolio in Guyana. Malaika holds a PhD in management studies from Cambridge Judge Business School, Cambridge University. Prior to joining the IDB, Malaika worked on several public-private partnerships and policy within the UK government, Chatham House, Shell Group, and served on several public boards. But I'll leave it to Malaika to tell you much more about her journey within the sustainable energy sector. Malaika?
Thank you so much, Sherry-Ann, and good morning, everyone. I'm really honored to speak to you today. And I'm going to start off by saying, I have to give you the why of my journey in sustainable energy. And the why begins with lessons in public service, really from my grandfather. He was a politician. He was a minister in the education ministry in Zimbabwe. And he would take me into the rural areas and the villages and show me how, he was changing lives, lifting people out of poverty with education. And, in that environment, I really had a chance to sort of understand political hustling, setting visions and targets, but also the challenges of having to deliver on critical services that people wanted. So that really stayed with me to this day, right? That vision and that image and that feeling of public service. I really then went on to, as Sherry was saying, I did a PhD in business management, but it combined supply chains, business management, and history. And what I looked at was the copper supply chain in Chile. I looked at local jobs and manufacturing, but what I was really searching for was what is the value added from those investments? How can I help to serve communities and raise their standards of living through jobs, through manufacturing jobs, through skills. And this was what I really put my mind to do in my PhD. But very soon I was asked to do something similar for an oil company and the think tank that looked at it from the corporate responsibility perspective, and then the UK government. And really those first 7 years of my life, of my career life, was spent around research, policy solutions for creating economic value via jobs, skills, and transparency standards. But I didn't want to just do research. I didn't want to just create policy recommendations. I wanted to get into the field and feel that change and be part of the impact. And so when I joined the IDB about 15 years ago, I really had an opportunity to do just that. I've been in the IDB for the last 15 years. My focus has been on improving lives through cheaper, cleaner, more resilient and reliable energy. And I had a fantastic opportunity to do that fieldwork that I wanted to do in Bolivia, in Jamaica, the Bahamas, and more recently in Guyana. So, in my job, in my role right now, what I do is I help to finance, whether it be blended finance or sovereign finance energy investments, but also design them and help to execute them with our government counterparts. We not only want to see those reliable, clean energy investments, but we also want to feel the development impact for people, particularly women and underrepresented communities, so skills and jobs associated with those energy investments. And, I've done 4 rotations now, and although I'm not an engineer nor an economist, I had to bring that sort of whole systems perspective of both generation, distribution, and what it means to affect communities. And so I'm really grateful that I've had this opportunity, and thank you very much for allowing me to share that experience.
Thank you, Malika. And one of the things that I share when I speak with young persons is that there's a place in the sector for everyone. And so we appreciate the perspectives that you have been able to bring to the sector.
Thank you.
All right. So next, I want to hear from Dr. Niebert Blair. Now, Dr. Blair is the Energy and Transport Coordinator for the NDC Tech Project in the Caribbean, supporting partner countries in policy and regulatory work that encompasses the energy and transport sectors and the updating of their NDCs. Besides having an MPhil in Industrial Systems, Manufacture and Management, she also has a PhD in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Cambridge and the University of Canterbury, respectively. She's also a chartered engineer with IMechE, and in her pastime, she enjoys playing cricket, basketball, and the guitar. So with that being said, Niebert, can you share with us a little about your journey in the energy sector?
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for that introduction, Shariana, and thank you for your story, Malika, so far. It's going to be an interesting morning. So, for me, my journey began coming out of secondary school, and while in school, I would have been involved in lots of projects, science fairs, designing work in energy systems in remote communities in Guyana while we attended camps, and these were church held camps. So I was out there every summer, and I enjoyed the experience working with interland residents while we were having our church camps. And following up from that, after school, I really wanted to become a doctor, I should add. But it was my mom's vision for me to become an engineer. She felt I might get bored being a doctor, given the fact of the lots of challenging things that I like to do around the home and fix things. And so with that understanding, my context in which I lived in, my community, the challenges we faced, and how we were trying to solve those challenges, from water to electricity. Most of you who live in Guyana, you know what happens in Guyana. And that was a good experience and exposure into this realm of energy and sustainable development for me. And then I further went on to University of Guyana, where I did my bachelor's in mechanical engineering and continued working with renewable energy systems as projects. And like Sharian, I highlighted, I went on to study further. And now I went into the field of manufacturing engineering. But before going to actually study manufacturing engineering, I was working at DDL. And there I was involved in a number of projects as well, Demerara Distillers Limited. And it really helped me to understand my place in society, where I fit best. And I got an opportunity to go to Belize. And in Belize, I was the first substations manager in Belize. And working there for a while, both in non-renewable and renewable energy technologies, I understand how power systems work, systems development. I applied my master's to developing the substations division. And then I returned to Guyana and started working with GPL and helping in terms of building the projects, building out the projects or implementing the projects that they had in the projects department, which was very, very what I would say in line again to what I was doing before leaving Guyana from my childhood growing up. And lots of those work consists of the building of the power plant at Vredenhoek, Wakenham, upgrading frequency conversion from 50 to 60 hertz in the Kingston power plant. So all of that helped me further to understand energy systems, the hardcore technical aspects of energy systems, where I can actually contribute to the development of our standards of living here in Guyana. And then further, I find myself working in policy and capacity building. I think it came naturally for me, and I really enjoyed my journey thus far. Following that, as well, through the PhD, I did some further design work in terms of sustainable electricity in the hinterland regions of Guyana. You know, there are over 200 Amerindian villages. Well, I worked with just one during the PhD to understand what their needs were and try to align them in terms of developing adequate and just sustainable energy systems. And today, it leads me to work with the GIZ, where I'm now the Energy and Transport Coordinator, helping to guide the transition that we're seeking to have in the next few years and immediate short term in both e-mobility and renewable energy, while of course reducing on our greenhouse gas emissions and looking at how do we further update our NDCs in 5 of the participating countries. So that's my journey. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Nevert. I identify with a lot of what you've shared, taking that technical path and then transitioning over to policy capacity building. So next we're gonna hear from Judith Ephraim. So Judith Ephraim Schmidt is the program director for the Sustainable Energy Unit of the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States, the OECS Commission. Ms. Ephraim Smith has been working in the field for over 20 years. She holds a BSc Honours in Environmental Geoscience from the University of Bristol, UK, and an MSc in Resource Engineering from the University of Karlsruhe, now Karlsruhe Institute of Technology in Germany. So Judith, what has that academic journey and those 20 years been like for you?
Good morning, and thank you, Sherry-Ann, and thank you to the organizers for this very distinguished panel. It's an opportunity, a pleasure, an honor to be here today. I can say that my path in terms of career has been an interesting one. It wasn't planned, but it was a choice. And looking back, I think it was an excellent choice. So I think as a student, it was difficult for me to actually choose a career because I love the arts, I love the sciences, but I love nature. This was the one thing I knew. I love nature. And I wanted to choose a career that was not just about accomplishments, but I had a very, even at that young age, I wanted to do something that was meaningful. I wanted to do something that, for instance, my integrity would not be compromised. I wouldn't have to make decisions on moral issues that, you know, might be difficult. So I think this kind of made it a little easier for me to gravitate towards environmental issues and, you know, issues that had a bit of a social consciousness to them. After I left the A-level college in St. Lucia, my first job was actually a teaching job. I taught geography in an all-males secondary school, and I vowed I would never go back to teaching again. Not that the students were bad, it's just that it really involved quite a bit of effort, and you began to understand how you needed to interact with people and to provide to each person their individual needs, because every student is different, the same way every segment in our society is different, and you have to understand people to be able to work with them. I left teaching after 1 year, and I went to the UK to do an undergrad in environmental geoscience. So I was doing a bit of my love, nature. I didn't just do strictly environmental science. I did a bit of geology, which was a little different, but I thought it would add some value to my career later on. I returned to St. Lucia in 2000 because I was keen on contributing and I wanted to, be in my country and to see what impact I could have had. As I neared the September of that month, I got a call from my old school and they wanted me to rejoin them, this time as a chemistry teacher. And I was considering that position, but at the back of my mind, I was hoping that I would have had the opportunity to explore something different. And I got a call from the Ministry of, at that time, Sustainable Development. And it was for a position of a professional cadet working on the Sustainable Energy Plan for St. Lucia. Now, I didn't know what that was. I did not actually study energy. I had studied environment, and I was looking forward to being out in the field and playing with chemicals and doing tests and, those types of engineering things to some extent. But I thought, okay, I'm going to consider that position. And my boss at that time, the head of the department, Mr. Vishnu Tulsi, he sold it well. He himself had been a teacher and he had transitioned to the public service, and now he was leading this department. It was a newly formed department, and there was a small role for energy. Although it actually started out as an energy department, the environment at that time was more interesting. I guess it was receiving more funding, and it had kind of bloomed and had taken over, but they still saw the need for environment. So in 1999, St. Lucia had boldly proclaimed that it was going to be a sustainable energy demonstration country by 2010. And so they had put in this very ambitious sustainable energy plan, and they wanted somebody to work on it. And so he convinced me, and I kept my eye open, and I explored that opportunity and joined the ministry. It was an interesting journey. It wasn't initially what I thought it would be. So I went into work and I saw all my colleagues going out into the field, going to sites, doing evaluations. And my day consisted of meetings and meetings and meetings. And it was difficult when I got home or when I came to my friends and they asked, what do you do? And I was trying to explain to them that we're working on this sustainable energy plan. St. Lucia hopes to be not energy independent, but we had some set targets for ourselves based on projects such as geothermal and solar. At that time, sustainable energy was not a buzzword. People did not know about PV, and electric cars was still a bit of a mystery. So it took a little bit of convincing, but we worked and we, gradually began the sensitization, which was one of the core areas that I was working on as part of this. But I think over the years, it has been quite interesting to see how that decision has impacted my life and the lives of others that I have met. So I stayed on with the ministry. I actually furthered my training and I got more qualified in the area. But whilst I was at the ministry, I got a chance to not only work on energy and science and technology, but also a bit of climate change. So I was also the lead negotiator for St. Lucia in terms of climate change mitigation. And I always saw the value of energy, not just as providing electricity, but the impact it could have had on the lives of persons. At the time, our plans were very ambitious. A lot of them are still relevant and have not been achieved today. But it is very encouraging to see the journey that we have taken. We've worked on policy. I've had the opportunity to support quite a bit of capacity building. We've seen transformation. Our negotiations with the utility at that time were difficult, but I have been able to witness in my short career, so to speak, a major transition in the thinking of our people, and the fact that people now can talk about sustainable energy. After about 15 years, I thought it was the opportunity for me now to advance and explore another realm outside of government. I didn't want to go too far. And so I saw an opportunity at the regional level at the OECS Commission, which I applied and I got the position. And now I am currently serving as the program director at that regional level. I'm supporting other member states, our 11 member states, and persons who would have sat who are now sitting in the role that I previously occupied, helping to bring them together and to support them in achieving their sustainable energy objectives for their country. So it has been an interesting journey. And like I said, it was not planned, but it is certainly one that has been very very productive and helpful. And I think I would encourage any young woman and any young professional to explore it, because as has been said, there's so many aspects that persons can contribute.
Thank you so much, Judith. I'm really excited hearing the different journeys that each of you have taken to where you are now. So next, we're going to hear from Cheryl Lewis. Now, Cheryl has over 20 years of energy-related experience. She's an attorney at law and holds the position of Deputy Director General at the Office of Utilities Regulation, Jamaica, with responsibility for legal and consumer and public affairs. She's a British Evening Scholar and holds a master's in international business law with distinction from the University of Manchester in England, a certificate of legal education from the Norman Manley Law School in Jamaica, and a Bachelor of Laws from the University of West Indies, also with honors from the Cave Hill campus in Barbados. Cheryl, what has your journey been like that's led you to energy?
Good morning, Sherry, and good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. It has been a journey, and the thing about it is that sustainable energy found me. I was at the Attorney General's chambers for a number of years. I was in litigation department and decided that I wanted to go ahead and do a master's. So I went and did my master's in international business law. And on my return, I really expected to get into the international law department. However, my solicitor general at the time thought that it was more prudent to put me in general legal advice department. In that department, you get to offer advice to administrators throughout the government. So all the sectors of the government, when they need an opinion, they would write, and it would be funneled through that department. And in 2004, it was while I was in that department as the director of that department that a request came from PCG at the time, requesting an opinion on whether or not the Wigton wind farm, which they had commenced operations, was properly within the context of the Petroleum Act. Because at that time, the Petroleum Act gave responsibility to the PCG to develop and to explore petroleum products, but it did not include renewable energy. And so it came for an opinion, and I indicated, I was the one who handled that matter and indicated that the construct needed to be amended. And so as a result, I gave that opinion, and an order was passed giving PCG the exclusivity for the development of renewable energy resources in Jamaica. Also, while I was at Attorney General's chambers, we undertook the whole thing about energy efficiency and seeking for cleaner fuels in the market. So I was heavily involved in the ethanol project, where we saw the introduction of the 10% ethanol in gasoline in Jamaica at the time, which was really a groundbreaking thing, as well as the privatization of the sugar industry with the intent that ethanol production could be localized and so serve the sustainable energy agenda. Unfortunately, that privatization process, although successful in terms of diversifying to private entities, did not yield the ethanol results hoped for. Also, while at the AG, the PCG had undertaken, now that they had the exclusivity to develop a waste to energy project, and I was the government representative on that energy to waste and waste to energy team. And so I was involved in the request for proposals and all of that while I was there. And in addition to additional things dealing with electricity. But in 2010, I got the opportunity and I was offered a position here at the Office of Utilities Regulation as their Deputy General Counsel. And having come here, the government fortuitously round about that time realized that the exclusivity granted to PCG was really inconsistent with the government's policy of encouraging the participation of private investors and investments in renewables, because PCG did not have the capacity at the time to develop the wide-scale energy resources which was required to drive the energy changes in the economy that they wanted to see. And so when the document came to the OUR for OUR's comments, having worked on the other side to advise the government that they needed to include renewables in the construct, I was able to give them advice about the removal of the exclusivity and the development of the energy sector. Consequently, after that, the OUR was then asked to have a procurement process of 150 megawatt of electricity from renewable sources in order to meet the target set out in the National Energy Policy of 30% by 2020. And so I became totally immersed in that, in the additional generating capacity. And we were pretty successful in our bids then. And then we had a second round with another 37 megawatts of electricity. And even the 100 megawatt recently done, the OUR also was very, very inclusive in that process. We gave a lot of support and advice to the generation procurement entity. And so that is my journey into renewables. Renewables found me, and I am truly happy that it found me, because I have had the experience of working and contributing to a greater cause, a nation-building cause of the reduction of electricity to meet the Sustainable Development Goals and to ensure that Jamaica becomes a competitive place where people, as the vision says, can live, work, and do business. So that's my journey into renewables and sustainable energy.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Quite an inspiring journey where you've gotten to work with renewables in different spheres of the sector, not just from the engineering side, but we definitely need to have those supportive policies and regulations to get what we need to do done. So commendable hearing, how renewables found you. All right, so our final panelist this morning is Ms. Marcia Maynard. Marcia is currently Vice President, Sustainable Energy Development at the National Energy Corporation of Trinidad and Tobago. She holds a BSc in Chemical and Process Engineering and an MSc in Engineering Management from the University of the West Indies. She's a chartered professional accountant and is a member of CPA Nova Scotia. She's a project management professional and serves as a member of the Project Management Institute and as a senior member of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. She's a member of the Women in Renewable Energy Network, WIRE, and Women in Green Hydrogen Networks, and has completed programs in environment, social and governance, ESG, renewable project finance, including renewable energy technology design and installation. Thank you so much for joining us, Marcia. Please share with us, what has your journey been like?
Okay, sure. Good morning, everyone. I think, like everyone else that sort of preceded me, it has been a place where it's the sustainability and this sector has, in fact, as I said, we sort of connected. I found my match, I guess, in my match in place in life, right? But for me, it was really in terms of having it started off with a very technical foundation. Primarily because it was more so in chemical and process engineering. So I would have always worked, what I would say, in the traditional energy sector in Trinidad and Tobago, with a lot of the first jobs really being interestingly enough, it started off in the environmental services area. So it would have incorporated things like, for example, environmental auditing of what I'll call traditional oil wells, bioremediation, oil spill management, and response planning and things like that. I then moved on into, again, still in the traditional energy sector, into petrochemicals. And I was on a methanol processing plant where I was primarily involved in the area of risk, which would have, again, looked at in terms of must have been more like process and safety risk as well as environmental risk. Around that time, interestingly enough, Trinidad would have, that would have been around 1995, Trinidad actually enacted their Environmental Management Act. And it was an interesting time because at that point, you were now having processing plants or our petrochemical industry now having to really start to adapt these new emission requirements into their process operation. So it really did provide for me, working on the one of those processing plants, having to do that. So it was something that it was a new application of new requirements. So that was certainly something that was quite interesting to do and to sort of like kickstart sort of marrying your industrial process to this new legislation and the new legislative requirements, I should say. So I stayed there, I think, for maybe about 4 years, and then I just didn't want to follow the traditional path of an engineer. I think when you get into those traditional sectors, you kind of know where you're going to land up. So you know you're going to probably end up either being the senior engineer, whatever the discipline is. And I was just like, well, how boring is it to just do a traditional path? So interestingly, I decided, you know what, I'm just going to take launch off and just take a deep dive and just see whether or not I will sink or swim. And I wanted to learn another sector, and I ended up actually applying for a position in the financial services sector. A lot of persons have asked, well, why would and it would have been what would have been RBTT, which is now RBC, and why would they hire an engineer in a banking sector? But interestingly, one of the things that you would find is that once you are what the engineering discipline, what it teaches you really is in terms of just being, you have to be logical and sequential, and it marries in terms of being able to do project management very, very nicely. So in fact, that's what I did at the bank. It was really being able to look at implementation of their projects. And because I had that sort of background, and more so in terms of the whole aspect of doing the sustainability up to that point, you were able then to add into new ideas in terms of how they approach projects and the different dimensions. Not only how, like, for example, how a traditional banker would look at projects. So I was there for just about 4 years, and I then started in the state sector where I am now at National Energy in 2006. And again, I was into the business development, which is really in terms of business development for the traditional downstream natural gas industry. And then around 2008, 2007 or 2008, I think was really, the full instigation into sustainability sector. Around that time, I was in fact appointed, there was a cabinet appointed committee looking at renewable energy. It was called a renewable energy committee, which was really looking at the policy for governing the sector. So that, I think, really would have pushed me into that space. And I've been looking into that sustainable energy development space since it's close to what, 2020, nearly 20 years in Trinidad. And I think because we are very strong in the traditional sector, energy sector in Trinidad, it is a sector that you have to have a lot of patience, and because it is challenging being able to marry the two, especially in this particular space. But it is something that I think once you stay the course, it has been very rewarding. I would say certainly for the last, with intermediate development we've seen in the last few years, and in terms of being able to see some of those things come to fruition in this local Trinidad environment. So I think that's it, Cherian, in terms of what my journey has been so far within this sustainable energy space.
All right, thank you so much for sharing, Marcia. And don't go too far because I'm going to start the next round of questions with you. But
Oh.
just to remind or those who are joining us this morning, that we want to hear from you. We want to know where you're joining us from. And if you have any questions that come up, you can type them in the chat. So we have Marcia, who's joining us from Trinidad, Malika Niebert joining us from Guyana, Judith joining us from St. Lucia, Cheryl is joining from Jamaica. I'm in Barbados. Where are you joining us from? And if you have any questions for our panelists, please also post that in the chat. So I'm going to start again with you, Marcia, as I said. So you've shared the history of the traditional energy sector in Barbados, Trinidad and Tobago. So what significant accomplishments are you proud of within the sustainable energy field in your career?
I think for me, it has been in terms of there have been some key highlights. For me, certainly for at least for this year, I think Trinidad is in fact moving into its first utility scale solar PV plant, and it was certainly quite delightful, I should say. It had its moments, but it always is delightful when you see the end results of a lot of work, and a lot of work that crossed many in the state sector, including the team here at National Energy. For me, that has certainly, because it really for us in this in Trinidad, being able to see a physical presence of that of having solar energy be a part of your what would be our energy mix, which has always been traditionally in primarily natural gas. So that has been would certainly for me, I would think for the number of years, even certainly before 2010, and it's being able to lead you up to actually seeing the fruition of it locally. It's certainly something that I think is one of the milestones. The other aspect of it as well, and this is on the whole, looking at in terms of seeing over the period of time, the number of young persons that I've seen come into the space. That has certainly been also for me quite rewarding in being able as well to be able to sort of like assist in charting some of them in the space of the sustainability sector. I have seen in terms of as well for even if when persons come out, and I think seeing them coming out of on the university side, some of them they come out with the technical aspect of it, and sometimes they just don't know where to start. And I think, I guess, as we probably move later on in the morning, I mean, there will be some, some thoughts and ideas in terms of some initiatives that you really try, especially as it relates to supporting women coming out into the space. And then how do you, help to sort of like guide them into that area. So for me, seeing that has also been one of the other highlights. And on the other part of, in terms of on the technical side of it, and just to kind of to close it off, would be in terms of for Trinidad, we are also moving into a new area in terms of utilizing hydrogen from a different source. Not from our traditional natural gas source, but looking at the opportunity to do the green hydrogen and integrate it into our existing energy industry. And that certainly is certainly an exciting time for the engineers that are with us now, and certainly for the upcoming engineers to look at being, and to be a part of seeing that physical transition of this local industry.
All right, thanks so much, and we are happy to see that and to hear of those accomplishments. Malika, what significant accomplishments are you most proud of throughout your career?
Yes, thank you, Marcia, for that, and Sherry for introducing this next session. But I think that for me, I've always been interested, as I said, in just both the policy and the implementation. So 10 years ago, when the then UK Prime Minister Tony Blair announced this initiative, Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, I was one of the first team members to help support the development of that initiative. It comes at a time where we're talking about trying to remedy the oil curse, and the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative was about building an international standard on mapping out those fiscal and financial flows. So it involved really consensus building, teamwork, talking to governments and financiers like Soros, and actually trialing it out in Trinidad and Tobago and in Peru, which is what I was leading at the time. So that was one really cool initiative I worked on that defined a lot of how I see my working career. And then jump 10 years later, I'm in Guyana during an oil boom, but now I'm working actually on domestic energy transition, on really ensuring that we have renewables on the energy matrix. And I'm very proud to be working on GuySol, the Guyana utility scale photovoltaic program in combination with GPL. This is funded obviously by the government of Norway with the IDB providing supervision in terms of design, development, and execution with GPL. And it's really going to move that needle on the energy matrix from close to 0 right now of renewables to 19% in the next 2 years. We've been working very hard in the field with GPL, helping them as they interact with the EPC, with the contractor to clear the sites, to get the land permits, all the details of risk and reward that comes with working on a truly transformative project. So that one is not just transformative because of the renewables, but also because we're going to be training 50 women in terms of solar installation. And here we're going to offer them also paid apprenticeship so that they take those skills and they apply it in a job. And I think that is something I'm very proud of.
All right, thank you so much, Malaika. Exciting to be working in the midst of an oil boom, but working on renewables. Definitely can understand that. Judith, what significant accomplishment would you like to highlight that you're proud of throughout your career?
Thanks, Sherry-Ann. This is a bit of a tricky question because it almost means that you have to choose between what sub area in the energy sector perhaps is perhaps more important to you. I think though, looking back, if I had to choose, I would choose something that seems a little boring, but let me just explain why. I think the work on the policy for me has been most significant, only because at that time, when I started with the government of St. Lucia, as I indicated, sustainable energy conversations were not being had. And so it really took quite a bit of effort, and not only on my part, obviously, but on the part of all the colleagues in the ministry, in the various ministries, but working together with the utilities and other partners like the OAS, CARICOM, everybody, to try to develop a policy for St. Lucia. So what had happened was we had made this bold, ambitious declaration, and we had developed a plan, but we didn't have the policy. It was like putting the cart before the horse. In some ways, I think it worked. It wasn't entirely bad because it forced us, because perhaps had we taken the natural route, it would have taken longer, the ambition would not have been so great. But we recognized that although what we had on paper and we had the endorsement of cabinet, that it was sound, we needed to put in the policy. And policy really lays the ground for everything. It lays the foundation. And it took a lot of effort, as I said. The utility at the time was in a different space. The private sector was in a different space. And we did not really have national capacity to push some of those things as we have today in all the countries. So I think those efforts, those early efforts towards sustainable energy policy for St. Lucia, which eventually came 10 years later when we should have had some of those projects, I think we are most proud of this because it really helped to set the ground for like the net metering pilot projects, for the projects on PV across the board, for LED lighting and those types of things. In terms of at the regional level, again, I think the OECS Sustainable Energy Framework, which I led during COVID, I think that this was a significant piece of work because it really helped to carve out a niche. We recognize that within the OECS, within the Caribbean, We have a number of energy partners who are doing incredible work, but we still felt that there was a need for us to kind of identify how we could have collaborated at the OECS level and bring meaning and value to what was already happening. I think we've made some demonstration projects. For instance, recently we partnered with the Sir Arthur Lewis to build on some of work that is done in Barbados, but also under the French cooperation we had with the Interreg, where we have some students working on retrofitting, and some girl students, I should say, female students, working on retrofitting a bus from the IC, internal combustion engine, to electric vehicle. I think that's a nice piece of work that we can continue on. But in terms of really building longevity and sustainability, I think working with the CDB, we were able to work on a significant initiative where we saw about 240 persons who were trained in PV installation. And we also trained some inspectors during COVID. And I think that brings a lot of value, because as we move into the sustainable energy transition, we need to ensure that we have certified persons who can take the work ahead.
Okay, thank you so much, Judith. And yes, we are grateful for those boring tasks that we have to do that set the stage for everything else to happen. And we did hear a bit of that policy and legislative work from Cheryl. So I'll now go to you to ask, what of the accomplishments you've shared some already, what would you want to single out throughout your career?
I think, Sherry, and I would just want to re-emphasize the legal and regulatory framework aspect of it, because I think we have done such a stellar job along when harnessed with the technical skills that Jamaica has created a very stable legal and regulatory framework for both the transition and the implementation of the sustainable energy goals. It has been quite a journey for us here, and recently through the Director General here, Anthony Hewitt, and the Deputy Director General with responsibility for electricity, and Cedric Wilson and myself and another have offered our services to the rest of the Caribbean to really allow them to learn from our journey and what we and the lessons we have learned, the mistakes we have made, and so that it is not replicated throughout the Caribbean. And so that is what I think we are most proud of. I mean, our technical skills, I think we have one of the larger markets here, along with in terms of even the procurement and the pitfalls in the procurement of the energy procurements for renewables, etc. I think that we have a lot to offer. And the intent is really to partner with CCRE, yourself, and with CDB and UCR to ensure that those resources and skills are really deployed throughout the Caribbean. So I think that that is what I am most proud of, the legal regulatory construct and the kind of advice that we can give to the government, who doesn't necessarily always agree, but at least we have our opinions, which are solidly based on data, based on trends, and based on the what is happening in the general sphere worldwide, and adapted to our own local circumstances. So I think that that is what I'm really most proud about.
All right, thank you so much, Cheryl. And yeah, we definitely appreciate sharing the lessons across the region. So Liebert, back to you. What would you want to highlight in terms of accomplishments that you're proud of throughout your career?
Hi, thank you, Sherry. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. For me, I have looked at all the things I've accomplished, and the one thing that stands out that bridges all of them is I am proud of the fact that I can work in different circumstances and different places and provide solutions. Maybe because that's the fact, because I'm an engineer and how I see things from an engineering standpoint. So there've been different projects, and they all would require different competencies, different skills. And I think the ability for me to get in on the ground with projects, whatever stages they are, and to work it through and make that project a success, that is what makes me proud, and that I consider to be one of my greatest accomplishments. I've worked with the project, as you will know. We did the apprenticeship program. I'm very much proud of that program. Most of, or all of our cadets are now working in good positions. And you would have known when I started our program, it was just there, and I had to take it through. Working in Belize, they had no knowledge of what substations management would be like, and I had to get in there, get on the ground, set it up. Until now, I would still hear the echoes of such good work in Guyana, working in the power company at GPL. So even working at DDL as well, some of my work there. So I really think my great accomplishment is the skill that I have, and it's a part of me. It's within me, where I go into whatever situation, whatever circumstances it might be facing, and I can actually provide solutions that work. And for that, I'm very much happy. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Nevert, and definitely, happy to hear how we've all been contributing to this energy transition. And so the next question that I have, I'm not going to call on anyone. I'm going to leave it open, and whoever wants to respond on some of the strategies or initiatives that you have found effective in promoting gender diversity within the energy sector. Malika, I did hear you mention the training of women for solar PV installers. That is one that I've seen. But is that effective? What are some of the things that you're seeing? I'm leaving it open for any of you to respond in terms of some of those strategies that really help to promote gender diversity within the sector.
Okay, I can start, Sherry.
Okay, and then I see Malika as well. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. So one of the strategies I think that was really helping promoting gender diversity within our sector is the fact that we have included women in a number of different areas, not just the traditional roles, but we have accepted women in different levels to contribute. I know there is a lot more that can be done in terms of having women in senior management positions within companies and so on, but having us there just in those areas that we are now present in has somehow allowed for us to work alongside the men, and not to just work independently of the men, but alongside to help in developing and finding solutions together. And I think that is something that we need to put a lot more focus on, and how can we work together, how can we collaborate, and not really just to be alone and take over. So I think that is one of the messages that I would want to share and see emulated. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much. Malika, what strategies have you found to be most effective?
Yeah, thanks, Sherry, and I totally agree with Nebet there. To put it into context, about 10 years ago, women only held 10% of posts in energy ministries, energy agencies, and even less in boardrooms. Today, that number is closer to 30%. And when I joined the bank in the energy division, I was one of 3 women staff. Now we're closer to 40%. The strategies really have a lot to do with building the pipeline, connecting women professionals, creating inclusive workplaces. I talked about training and apprenticeships. That's really important. Providing women with a stipend, maybe for childcare and transport. So these are very important strategies for helping women come into the energy space and stay in there. But we also have to measure it and relate it to corporate goals. And in the IDB, we are one of the only multilateral organization that's not just measuring those inequalities for women, but also for Afro-descendants, people with disabilities, and the LGBTI community. We call it alignment, and that is something that we take very seriously. And as a result, you see the trend now in the energy division. So very grateful for it, but I know that it's still a long journey, you know, there'll always be discrimination, there'll always be harassment, you know, but we have to maintain the momentum on these interventions.
All right, thanks. I definitely like that. And I find, yeah, oftentimes when we're doing our projects and programs, we don't give enough thought to making sure that we're making space for women to thrive and to actively participate. Judith, did I see you coming in on that? Okay, Marcio.
I was just going to add a little bit to this. I also think that in the development of the projects, yes, we need the quotas for like capacity building and for inclusion in certain activities. But I also think in the design of the projects, if we think holistically and we think of the beneficiaries, it kind of opens an opportunity for more women to become involved from the beginning. So you're not just doing a solar project to give you electricity, you're doing it to give you electricity to improve whether it's the operations of the home or the business or the community. And so you get women who are involved in all aspects, other aspects, and so they can contribute, they become key stakeholders, and you know, you can answer to their needs, and they too see an opportunity for them to be more involved in this particular work. It's slower, but I think when we become more holistic in the design of projects and we think of the target beneficiaries, it will also open up doors for more diversity.
All right, thanks so much for that, Judith. I'm not yet seeing any questions coming in from the audience. Just reminding you, we are going to be winding down shortly. So if you do have any questions for the women, please make sure you share those in the chat. Marcia, please go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to add some of the things that for me, I've seen the benefits, one in terms of, well, the specific associations and forums. I think, as I would have mentioned before, in one of the highlights for me in terms of seeing the interests that has certainly ramped up in terms of, especially for on the female side of it, you know, having that interest in the space. I think it's important to have very, very focused associations that support them through their journey. Some of them now starting out, and even more so in terms of and I would speak to, I think I would have, I think when you probably during the introduction, you talked about, like, for example, women in green hydrogen. This is a new space. And I think when you have new spaces and you're focusing in new areas, you really want to make sure that you sort of coalesce all the experiences across, just not regionally, internationally, in terms of where women sit across the different spaces in some of these new areas. The other aspect of it is in terms of, I always believe in supporting them in entrepreneurship and in innovation, that they are going to play a role, especially as they open up a lot of them into the STEM spaces, so that if it is that you incorporate them along your projects, not only on the policy side, but you also see them. There are some businesses that I've seen in terms of where they're led by female solar installers. You really want to support, continue to support some of their areas with some of them along these particular aspects. So I just wanted to add that into the conversation.
All right, thanks so much. And we have our first question from the chat. So Cheryl, since you didn't respond to the last one, I'm going to throw that one to you. What setbacks, if any, have you experienced as a woman working in a male-dominated field, and how did you overcome that?
Okay, working initially when I joined the OUR, the engineering section and everything, it was a male-dominated area. But I do find that it was not so much focused on gender, but on competence. It is very important for whether it is a woman or a man, but I mean, in this case, we're discussing women, that no journey is really complete without setbacks and struggles and trials. That's just part of life and part of the journey. And the important thing really is to focus on your own competence and becoming all you can be. You ought not to really shrink yourself or cut yourself back to fit into a mold or a concept of what somebody else wants you to be, but to become everything that you want to be and what you want to achieve. Is there space to finesse ourselves? Is there space to shave some areas? Most definitely. But you are going to have some sort of pushback when you come into a space and persons don't really know who you are. They don't know your competence. And so you have to essentially step forward and do what you need to do and pursue a spirit of excellence. So there are going to be setbacks. There are going to be mindsets. People come with their own different experiences. And so you really can't take that on. What you can, or however, do as a woman and as any individual, I would give the same advice, is to really step back, analyze where you are, pursue a spirit of excellence, prepare all the time, prepare to show respect and to do whatever it is. And don't see the workspace as a woman against a man, but it is really to be harnessed as a unit, because you're working as a team. There's one common goal, and you have to push forward to with that. I mean, persons sometimes may interpret what you're doing to be in a competitive space, but really and truly, you can't really control what others think. You, as I said, you have to own who you are and seek to excel in what you do. Eventually, everything would come to light. Eventually, your true nature will come to light. Eventually, your true intent will come to light. And so, and without the struggle, if you take a butterfly from a cocoon prematurely, it can't fly because its wings need to be strengthened. And so within the context of these struggles and setbacks which we face, like in any other workspace, I think we have to reframe sometimes. We have to reframe what we're going through, see where it is, where it may affect you, and reframe it to be something that push you along to achieve and push you along to ensure that you become all who you can be within the space. So that's what I would say.
All right, thanks so much, Cheryl. Really appreciate that. The next question coming to us from Tayton, joining us from St. Lucia. What is the main skill outside of your energy-related profession? So outside of the primary training that you would have done, what would you say is the main skill that would be important for a young professional to gain to be successful in the sector? Right, I'm gonna also, okay, I see Cheryl. Okay, go ahead, Cheryl. I'm gonna also ask Judith and Niebert to respond. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, I would have to say agility. We live in a very complex world where the paradigm is not singularly focused anymore. It's really multi-focused. And so to be successful in this sector of sustainable energy, you have to be up on your financials, knowledge. You have to be up on the economics of it. You have to be up on the procurement. What is the trend in the world now with the climate change? How is that going to impact you in terms of the financial sector? So those skills to harness information and to make it adaptable into your own local circumstances to inform how you go forward. I think that is a skill which is absolutely, absolutely critical in going forward. Another one is really not to presume that because you are trained in a particular area, that you carry all the knowledge that there is. This particular area requires a lot of collaboration with other entities and other skills, with the technical, the financial, the economics, the engineering. And because here at OUR, we really do have multi-sector, multi-skill teams. And those teams are the most effective because you have in one place everything to assess the entire circumstances with what you're dealing with. So those are the things that I would say.
All right, thanks so much, Judith.
Yes, and just to add to that, I think Charles made some very, very good points about owning your space and really knowing your work. There's so many different areas that you can contribute to based on your background. I think it's important to understand that what one person brings to the table would differ from another, but they're both equally important. I think other issue. I think the other point to be made is about being a problem solver. The energy space is dynamic. Even countries who have thought that they have figured it out, when like Germany and some of the other European countries, they meet with new challenges. It's emerging, it's evolving. So you have to have a mindset to be able to take a situation and to be able to adjust as you come up with new challenges. She spoke about the collaboration. I think that's vital. So some of those softer skills like collaborative working together, like negotiations, like being able to sell your vision. So if you have a strong idea in your head, and for energy to work, you have to have different people to buy into that vision, be it the utility, be it the provider, be it the regulator. You need to have that ability to be able to package your vision in a way that is palatable, that shows the synergies, that shows the complementarities, and that persons can then buy into that vision to own it. And so together you can work to make it a success. So you need soft skills, you need the hard skills, but the soft skills are equally important because of the various stakeholders that you have to work with.
All right, thanks so much, Judith. I think at some point we need to find another word for soft skills because they're so crucial to being able to get the work done. All right, so the final question, and I'm going to invite all of our panelists to turn on your cameras, and I want you to share as we close your aspirations for the future in terms of advancing the energy transition and sustainability within the Caribbean. Where do you want to see us go? What are your aspirations? What are you dreaming big about when you think about the future of the Caribbean energy sector? Nibers, I'll start with you.
Okay, thank you, Sherry. The future for the Caribbean energy sector would be one where I think we are a lot more innovative in identifying solutions that are customized to our conditions, as well as our technical conditions, our climate conditions, our financial conditions. How do we charter that journey of finding the necessary financial resources that we require to have? And at the same time, I know for sure we do have the skilled human resources around, but how do we keep them here so that they can develop the solutions that we seek and not just to copy or have those handed down solutions that we want to take on without first understanding what really are our challenges and problems. So the future I see here in the Caribbean, I don't want to be too utopia about what I would see, but to be realistic, I think I see a space where we can move into becoming a lot more innovative and identifying solutions that will work for us. I'll just leave it there. Thank you.
All right, thanks so much, Nibert. Marcia, what are your aspirations?
Okay, so I'm real big. I just wish the Caribbean would be something like the EU. I think as a strong economic trading bloc, because in terms of instead of still being separate, and being able to me to be able to get over this whole aspect as it relates to this the climate and the challenges that we will all face in our own economies and so on. I think that is the way to go. You have to create energy that transcends boundaries, that people can be able to support, plug in on energy. So if you're dealing if you're in the OECS, you're producing geothermals. If you have the gas, you have in terms of having your solar and so on, you're able to have that one Caribbean. And that for me is, so I'm on the big dream. Yeah, I don't know the utopia, but I'm on the big dream I think that it is time that we see ourselves in this place of like the EU and really so you can command in this space. So that's me.
All right, thanks so much. I like that. I definitely do. Cheryl, what's your big dream?
I think my big dream is really for the Caribbean to be a space where it's highly competitive in the international market, where we produce energy at one of the lowest costs so that we can make our peoples better, because energy is now the key economic driver along with telecommunications in the international sphere and economic zones. And so if we get that right, then there is no telling where we can be. And it is with that hope and aspirations and with what we are discussing here and the skills which we can deploy within ourselves, because we can't continue to look externally for the answers, because the external persons often design stuff based on their own local circumstances. When introduced in the Caribbean, is not adaptable in some instances, or if adapted, it doesn't quite fit. So I think we have to harness ourselves and to ensure that we become all that we can be. We are brilliant people, we go abroad and we excel. So we can do it here, and to have a vision that is greater than ourselves. Marcia has said, just like the EU, I mean, that's really big, but we can do it if we put our minds to it. So that's what my hope and aspiration.
All right, thanks, Cheryl. Malika, what is your aspiration for the regional and the sustainability sector?
I really love all the suggestions that have been put forward, particularly the more regional integration, more regional collaboration. So I think we can't keep our eye off the decarbonization goal, decarbonizing not only the energy industry, transport, aviation, shipping, but also bringing the urgency of financing resilience. Resilience for existing infrastructure, resilience for future infrastructure, and looking at resilience not just in terms of hardening it, but also the resilience in terms of skills. We talked about those soft skills, being able to be resilient, being able to shift and change as the energy sector changes. So I think a lot more regional collaboration around decarbonization and resilience.
All right, thank you so much, Malika. Judith, you get the last word. What are you aspiring for with regards to the region and the sustainability sector?
I think a combination of everything that has been said. I think we need to be a model for the rest of the world. Energy prices in the Caribbean are top at the global level, but I think we have a great opportunity. I think the same way when we think of Olympics now, and we can think of small islands, but we can, call out some names, St. Lucia, Jamaica, St. Kitts, whatever. I think we can do that in the energy space. We have the passion. We have plans on paper. We have a cadre of both male and female young professionals who are eager to make their contribution. And I think we just need to do it. And I think if we can make it so that the energy sector supports and transforms the whole of the economy, the whole of our social sectors, then we would have had success. So I can't wait for the next geothermal plant. Maybe it will drive the interconnection that the other colleagues have spoken of, but I think we need to put ourselves on the map and own our vision.
Thank you so much, Judith. And thank you, ladies, for sharing with us this morning, sharing your journeys. It was inspiring to hear the different paths that you took to find energy or for energy to find you, and how we as a region can use our resources, or human resources, or natural resources to transform our economies if we indeed work together. And definitely looking forward to see the continued impact that each of you will make on this regional sustainable energy sector and transforming it into an economic driver, which really is the big vision. Thanks to those of you who have stayed with us. We know we've been a little bit over time, but we really appreciate that you've been patient with us, and I hope that you've enjoyed the discussions as much as I have. And just to let you know, the final installation in this CARICOM Energy Month webinar series takes place next Wednesday, where we're going to be looking at decarbonizing a seaport in Guyana. Now, we know that transport and marine transport is one of those harder to decarbonize sectors. So it's going to be a very interesting discussion to hear on the approach that is being proposed for a seaport in Guyana. Hope you will join us again next week. But until then, have a good and productive rest of your week.